My husband and I were together for 6 years before we got married, and we had never been to church together. 6 weeks after our honeymoon, my dad OD'd on heroin. My side of the family has a history of addiction. I wanted to break the chain. My husband and I took my sisters, who were 10 and 12 at the time, into our home. I wanted to do anything to help my sisters lead productive lives. I thought taking them to church was the best way to do that. And then Jesus sucked me in, and then he sucked my husband in, and within 5 years' time, we had all found life in Jesus.
It was in the middle of the night. I was dealing with some fear and anxiety, having just survived a pulmonary embolism. My son was 2 days old. I had developed a blood clot from my C-section that traveled to my lungs. I was afraid if I closed my eyes, I wouldn't wake up. He said, "Jen, I have you, and I am not done with you." I had a peace and calm come over me. It was the best sleep you could have with a newborn that night. Since then, Christ has been the center and focus of our family. My husband and I now have 3 kids, and they are all little Jesus freaks.
I'm Steve. I've been an alcoholic all my entire life. I've been drinking for about 43 years. Basically, depression and PTSD were overwhelming me. I'd stopped for a few months, but relapsed and wound up with the shakes on my couch. I shouldn't even be standing here. I was taking like 3 breaths an hour. I remember praying, like, God, either let me die or help me to get sober. In that moment, Jesus became real to me. Ever since, I've been praying every day, trying to develop a relationship with him. I don't like to cuss anymore. I got a real job. Haven't missed a day of work since I started. Been in and out of AA for 25 years. Now I've been sober for 1.5 years. It's the longest stretch of sobriety I've ever had. Jesus knows my name. He's heard me many times. I had to go to the bottom, I guess. And now I feel like a different person inside, and I give all that to Jesus, and I just try and praise him and serve him to the best of my ability today.
So the birth of babies is nothing new. I actually helped deliver one before, but during the birth of my first child, it was like God was whispering in my ear. I was overwhelmed. God was telling me that she was my responsibility. I've carried that weight ever since. As she grew and began to ask questions, it made me take my faith more seriously. I was taught to be independent, not to bother God. My firstborn changed that way of thinking for me. I felt helpless. I knew I couldn't do this without significant help from God. God was whispering my name when I watched my daughter being born.
I'm Melanie. I grew up in a church and around other Christians who use their religion to talk down to everybody. For example, I was told I would go to hell because my parents got divorced. Church just wasn't fun. I later got married, had a son who passed away at 11 weeks old. We got no support, no help from the church, so we walked away from the church completely. When you lose a child, your whole life flips upside down. You start questioning whether or not you're going to make it. In hindsight, one by one, people would come out of the woodwork to remind us that life is bigger than ourselves or our situation. But that's how God becomes personal. How else would God show himself to us in that moment? And now my life is nowhere near where I expected it would be. Losing my son has given me a completely different perspective on life.
My name is James. I used to believe in God the same way a kid believes in the Easter Bunny. I didn't trust God and I wasn't vulnerable to him. One day I was talking to the woman who would become my wife on Facebook about where we were spiritually. We got to a point where we were writing super long paragraphs to each other, and I noticed a shift in my language. Early in the conversation, it was, I used to go to church, but as the conversation progressed, God got real personal. My words changed to, I am a Christian, I want to go to church, and this is who I want to be. And coming to Ginghamsburg Church was actually one of our first dates. My life was seated in that moment, the moment Jesus became personal.